Let's face it, after a long day at the grindstone, an hour or two of gaming can be the perfect way to unwind. But where most games adopt a simple pick up and play approach that allows you to dip in and out at your leisure with little to no consequences, other titles demand that little bit more from players and force you to adhere to its own schedule as opposed to your own. At best, taking some time away from a game usually will just mean that your skills will wane and you'll be a bit rusty when it comes to fisticuffs, or whatever the kids are calling it nowadays. At worst, the game will actively seek to punish you for your lack of dedication, leading to all manner of anger and frustration. It's all well and fine to get good, but you've got to keep up the getting and gooding if you stand a chance with these titles. Hey, I am the quitter, Ash from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are 10 ways games punish you for not playing them. 10. Near endless announcements. Splatoon. Nintendo's latest franchise, Splatoon, marked a significant change in the way that the company approaches their games, being the first multiplayer-focused title that put a greater emphasis on squad-based gameplay and online connectivity. It's the kind of fast-paced, frantic fun that's ideal for short bursts of play on your lunch break. However, upon booting up Splatoon, you are treated to a newscast in which you're told about all the recent events, updates, and refreshed game modes that have happened in your absence. Depending on how long it's been since your last ink-soaked skirmish, this process can end up taking quite a while, with up to several minutes worth of incoherent babbling standing between you and the actual game. You can pound away at your controller to skip through each announcement in turn, but that ultimately feels like a chore when all you want to do is dive on in for a quick round of splat zones. This isn't an intentional punishment by any stretch, but when you've only got a limited amount of time to squeeze in a few games, the incessant chatting and slew of announcements can really start to grind your gears. 9. Spooky shenanigans. Fatal Frame series. You can't be blamed for taking a quick breather when it comes to horror games, especially when it's something as downright terrifying as the Fatal Frame series. These J-horror inspired fright fests are amongst the scariest games ever made, and it can take an iron resolve to see them through to the end. If you decide to take a break from solving puzzles and exercising vengeful spirits without pausing the game, however, spooky things will begin to happen. In the original game, a series of bloody handprints will begin to fill the screen, obscuring your vision and leaving you vulnerable to any ghosts that may be lurking nearby. The second and third installments pull a similar trick, although this time around the bloody handprints are swapped out for something a little scarier. If you're idle for long enough, the screen will also go fuzzy, as if taken over by a static, and the image of a ghostly woman will begin to randomly appear on screen, accompanied by some very unnerving sounds. It may not sound like much from my description, but it can be a nasty shock for those who aren't in the know. 8. Your crops die. Farmville. Completely loathe it or secretly love it, there is no denying that Farmville really struck a chord with the masses on release. Appealing to casuals, the management types, and even your great-grandmother, Farmville was at one time an absolute juggernaut of the casual gaming scene. Although, don't let its cutesy demeanour and entry-level accessibility fool you. Farmville is not a particularly forgiving title, with its insistence on you sticking to the clock being perhaps its most egregious feature. Once a player has planted a crop, it would take several hours for it to actually materialise. What many players weren't counting on, however, was that once a crop does appear, a secondary timer is activated which turns your crops into a ticking time bomb. If you don't harvest it within a set period, it will turn ripe and become completely useless, thus beginning the cycle over again, having to wait several in-game hours to reap the rewards. This inevitably places players in a vicious cycle of having to constantly go back to the game to ensure their farm achieves the growth they desire and no playtime is wasted. 7. The game ends. Far Cry 4. At the start of Far Cry 4, you're abducted by a group of thugs who work for the local warlord, Pagan Min. You're hauled off to their sanctuary and Min sits you down for a spot of lunch and maniacal ranting. Midway through proceedings, his phone rings and you're told, "Don't move, I'll be right back." This is your opportunity to escape your confines and flee into the jungle, setting you off on a vast journey full of action and bloodshed. If for some reason you don't take this opportunity to leave, or simply don't play the game because you're off making yourself a cup of tea, you may find your journey coming to an abrupt end. If you wait for 13 minutes, Min will return. He'll then thank you for your patience, explain his connection to your family, which you typically only learn by playing the game, and hey presto, roll credits. It's a fun little Easter egg, all things considered, but given how much of a raucous good time Far Cry 4 is, you are sorely missing out on the experience by not actively playing the game. 6. Spinning Discs of Death. Smash TV. Midway's arcade classic Smash TV is one of the most action-packed twin-stick shooters you could ever hope to play. You and a friend, if you've got one handy, would be under constant assault from all manner of monsters, maniacs, and machinery, so much so that it can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. Given that this game constantly throws hordes upon hordes of enemies at you, it is only natural that you might want to take a breather between all of the mindless chaos. Upon clearing a room of enemies, you might think that'd be the ideal time to take a rest. Sadly, that is not a good idea. Spinning metal discs will begin to hurl themselves at your character if you do so, prompting you to make a very speedy exit and avoid losing all of your progress and loot. These discs are very fast and can be tricky to avoid if they catch you off guard. It's a monumentally cheap and nasty tactic to keep players pushing on, not allowing them even a second to get their bearings together for the challenges that lie ahead. But hey, it's there, so you gotta deal with it. 5. Your food supply rots. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Even since the earliest days of the franchise, Hideo Kojima has always tried to think outside the box and give players a unique experience, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was no exception. The console's internal clock affects many aspects of the game, but most annoyingly is how it can affect the items in your inventory. If you go a couple of days without playing the game, the food supplies you've collected along the way will rot, rendering them useless. If you did decide to eat them, Snake will become ill and your health will start to dwindle away. This can cause you a colossal nightmare if you've got a boss fight looming on the horizon or a particularly tricky section to handle. Adversely though, this can actually be beneficial as during a fight against the Fear, you can drop the rotten food items for him to pick up and consume, causing him damage and giving you an edge in battle. So, swings and roundabouts I guess. 4. Sonic Bails. Sonic CD. In a game which the entire ethos is gotta go fast, it should seem like a no-brainer that you'd be punished for not getting your skates on. Even as far back as the original game, the snarky blue rodent would tap his foot and stare you down if you kept him waiting, which is just really rude. This idle animation became a quintessential part of Sonic's attitude and was a welcome addition in each subsequent game. The vastly underappreciated Sonic CD took this one step further and would actually punish you if you left Sonic on his lonesome for too long. Whilst in game, if you put down the controller or just take a break to go walk the dog, Sonic will start his usual sassy antics and stare you out, tapping his foot as he does it. If you leave him waiting for 3 minutes though, he'll get fed up of the whole endeavour, shout, "I'm out of here," and dive off the stage, ending the game and kicking you back to the menu screen. Let this be a lesson that pausing the game is always the best way to go. 3. Extra Chores. Animal Crossing series. While it looks all cute and fuzzy on the surface, Animal Crossing is a series that demands a lot of time and dedication from its players. Its pick up and play approach to gameplay can be the perfect antidote to a stressful day at the office. But the trouble is, you've got to pick it up and play it every single day to ensure that your tranquil little town doesn't fall into ruins. Making great use of the console's internal clock, events and item cycles are fixed to real-world times, and therefore players are expected to play the game at specific times to access certain content. This also extends to how the town functions, with both wildlife and plant life being time-specific. This means that plants, weeds, and various other naturally occurring elements will continue their cycle whilst you're not playing. If you decide to skip a couple of days in favour of actual socialising, you may come back to your town to find it covered in weeds and some of your neighbours have left due to the appalling conditions that they've had to endure during your leave of absence. That's what you get for having real friends, I guess. 2. Semen dies. Semen. Undoubtedly one of the strangest games to ever grace a home console, Semen has to be seen to be believed. Players must care for a human-fish hybrid, the titular Semen. This is the most I've ever said Semen in a list, so I hope you're enjoying this. Tending to its needs, which range from basic necessities like food to engaging in conversation and trivia games. The latter of which was possible by use of a Dreamcast microphone add-on that let you wax lyrical with your mutant semen on a number of subjects. Playing like a twisted take on the Tamagotchi craze of the 90s, Semen is designed for those who like to stick to a rigid schedule. You must check on your semen at least twice a day to make sure they are adequately fed and their tank is kept to the correct levels. If your real-world responsibilities should get in the way and you neglect your semen for a few days, it can succumb to a number of different fates. The most common of which is starvation, but loneliness and incorrect oxygen levels in the tank can also be contributing factors to hurting your semen. 1. Your dog runs away. Nintendogs. One of the defining titles for the Nintendo DS, Nintendogs holds a very special place in the hearts and minds of many gamers the world over. Its simple gameplay and large roster of precious pups to preen, pamper and play with resonated in a way that few other games had done before. For all of its cutesy charms, however, Nintendogs was an accurate depiction of pet ownership, with players needing to tend to all of their dog's needs on a regular basis to keep them happy and healthy. Should you fail in your duties, you'd face the terrible consequences. This is still a Nintendo game after all, and booting up the game to find a virtual dog corpse would be a little too extreme for the core audience, but if you were a terrible owner, your dog would simply abandon you. That's right, you boot up the game only to be greeted with a message telling you they'd ran away. In an instant, all of your shortcomings and failures hit you like a ton of bricks, and you must deal with it in whatever way you can. And all because you loaded up Splatoon and couldn't get through the announcements in time. For shame, guys. For shame. And that's our list. What other ways do lazy gamers get punished? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash over on Twitter at @AshMillman, and this has been WhatCulture Gaming. And come back again soon for some more lovely Semen gaming content. Thanks for watching.